Hi, and welcome back to the Public Gardens GIS training series. This is lesson 4. Today we'll learn how to prepare to collect data out in the field using the ArcGIS Public Gardens data model. As in previous lessons, we will need to have a computer running Windows XP or better, the Arc Editor or Arc Info license level of Esri's ArcGIS Desktop 9 or 10 software, and we will also need a Windows mobile-based data collection device running Esri's ArcPad 8 or 10 software. All right, let's get started. Okay, here we are back at the computer. Okay, the first thing we're going to do to get started with today's lesson is to open a web browser and download the lesson data from the Alliance for Public Gardens GIS website as we did in lesson 3. So again, type in the address www.apgg.org, the address bar of your web browser, and once you get to the site, scroll down to where it says Downloads under Public Garden Data Model. And then scroll all the way down to the bottom, and under the Public Garden GIS Training Series, there should be a file for Lesson 4. Click on Download. And then, as in Lesson 3, we're going to save this to our working folder. And since that was the last place I went, it opened right back up to it. If it doesn't do that for you, you'll need to navigate to the location of that folder. Go ahead and save it. And then we will close the web browser and open Windows Explorer and browse to the location on your hard drive where you saved it. For me, it's in CGIS and UC Davis Arboretum. You may have named that folder according to the name of your garden. When you get in there, you'll see some of our leftover files, probably from previous lessons. First thing we're going to do, though, is we're going to extract the Lesson 4 files into a new folder. And as I mentioned before, depending on what kind of file compression software you have on your computer, the process for this may be different. Many people can right-click on it and hit Extract. In my case, I have to hit Open with WinZip here, so I'm using WinZip. And I'm going to unzip it, and it's going to ask me where I want to put that. And I'm going to put it right into that same location that we've been using. I'm going to make a new folder called Lesson 4. And I'll unzip to that. Oops. And it looks like I didn't do that correctly. So I'm just going to go ahead and do that again. Now I'll hit unzip, and then it does it correctly for us. Okay, so there's a few files in here that are of interest. We've got these top 3 files make up an aerial photograph for the East Asian section of the UC Davis Arboretum, which is where we're going to prepare to collect our data. And then there are 2 text files in here, one called scientific name and one called source accession number. And these are files I generated from our plant records database, which I'll go into a little bit more detail about later, but they essentially contain a list of all the scientific names for the East Asian section of our garden, and then another file containing all the accession numbers for the plants in the East Asian section of our garden. And again, there's another geodatabase preloaded with the Public Garden data model in there ready to go. So we can go ahead and close that folder. Close WinZip if that's still open for you, and close the other folder, and that'll conclude the download section. Okay, so now that we have the lesson data downloaded and extracted to a folder on our hard drive, we're going to do a little preparation in getting ready for data collection. To do that, we're going to open our catalog here. And what we're going to do is we're going to basically create some drop-down lists so that when we're collecting data out in the field, instead of having to type in the scientific name or the accession number for a plant, we're going to create some pick lists or drop-down lists so that we can just select them instead of having to do any typing, which on mobile devices can be a little bit tricky. So when you get our catalog open, navigate to the folder where we've been working. And for me, that's my CGIS UC Davis Arboretum. And I've created that Lesson 4 folder in there where I extracted all the data to. And as I mentioned previously, we have a geodatabase that has all of our data model objects in it. We have a raster data set here that contains an aerial photo of the East Asian section of the UC Davis Arboretum. And then these 2 text files here that contain a list of all of our scientific names and source succession numbers for that section. If I click on this file and hit preview, it's not going to show me a preview, so we'll just have to live with that. Essentially, these files are they're set up so that it's just one column that has the name of the field at the top, which is scientific name, and then a list of all the different scientific names inside of that section. And same with source succession number, it just has a column header on it and then a list of all of those accession numbers. I feel like I should maybe show you what these files look like really quick. And a good way to work with these kind of files are in Microsoft Excel. So if I open up Excel here, and hopefully that did it, and it will open. There it is. I can open up that file by navigating to where our working folder is, Lesson 4. If you hit the type thing on the side here, you can select all files, and then we'll see our scientific name file. Select it and open it, and he asks you, what kind of text file is this? How are the fields delimited? So how does it know how to put things into columns, essentially? And I'm going to leave it on delimited here because they are delimited. And how is it delimited? Sometimes they're usually by tab or by comma. I usually check both of them, and I'll take care of it for you. But there's only one column in this data, so it's nothing fancy to split up. But essentially, as you can see here, we've got a list of all of our scientific names in alphabetical order, with the top of the list being the column header, and it's just the name of the field, scientific name, and then a list of all of our scientific names. And that goes all the way down. So if you have a plant records database, you can go into that database, and usually there's some kind of summarize or export feature in which you can create a text file that will just list all the different names inside a particular field. So that's the formatting of that file. I'm not going to save it. So as I mentioned, we have one for scientific name and one for source succession number. So what we're going to do now to turn these into drop-down lists in the data model is use some geoprocessing tools which are built into ArcGIS. And to get those, we're going to open the Arc Toolbox window here from the top. And that window will take a second to get open. To get that window open, you can click on the top of it and drag it until these little blue arrows come up in ArcGIS 10. And if you click on one of them, it'll dock it to the side. It makes it kind of convenient. And if I want to close that, I can unclick the pin here, and it just kind of minimizes off to the side. It's pretty slick. I'm going to keep it open for the purpose of the lesson here, but what we're going to do is basically turn this text file or table into a domain in the geodatabase. To do that, you go to Data Management Tools, and you go to Domains here, and there's this little tool to turn a table into a domain. If we double-click on that, it asks you, what's your input table? And we're going to start with scientific name. You can just drag that right from the Contents tab or right in there. And then I ask you, what field in here is going to represent the code that's going to be used in this domain? And the way that the data model is set up, we use the same thing for the code and the description for the domain. Codes usually can be things like numbers, like 1, 2, 3, 4, and then when you use that number in the database, that equals a value, such as a scientific name or an accession number. But to make things easy and simple, we use the same values for both, so there's no confusion. So when you click the drop down here, it only gives you one choice, scientific name and scientific name for both sides. And then the input workspace, that's going to be our geodatabase. So I'm going to drag that right in there. And then the name of the domain is going to be scientific name. But because this is just our list of scientific names for the East Asian section, I'm going to add East Asian onto the end of this so that we can differentiate. If we're going to collect data in other sections, we can have a list of scientific names for each section. And then when we're out in the field, we're not accessing one list that has every scientific name for our entire garden, which could get quite long. In the domain description, this is a spot to kind of describe what this domain is used for. And you can see that I've already created this domain in the geodatabase, so it brings up a list or the description that I've already typed in. And this is kind of the standard format for that we describe the domains in there, because a domain is a list of valid values that you're going to pick from a list. And then I'd say which feature class it's going to. Since we're going to be, this is for plants, it's going to go to the Plant Center feature class, as we've worked with previously. And then what's the name of the field, scientific name. And since this is for the East Asian section, I'll also write that in there. So it asks me, how do I want to append values to this list, or the other option is to replace. And since we've already created that, I'm going to use replace so we don't get any duplicate values. But since I've done the work of typing this here, I'm just going to copy this and paste it back in here so we don't have to type it again. Okay, once you got all these filled in, you can hit the OK button. And with ArcGIS 10, these geoprocessing tools now run in the background. So you can see down at the lower part of the screen here that it's working on it. And when it's all done, it's going to pop up a little message box in the lower right-hand corner telling us that it's done. There it is. And now to make sure that this worked, we can get the properties by right-clicking on the geodatabase. And then it brings up two tabs here. One's the general, and then here's the domains tab. So click on domains, and if we scroll down, these are in alphabetical order. We scroll down, there's our scientific name for the East Asian section, and you can see that it's created a list with, there's that code field, and there's the description field, same on both sides. Goes all the way down, and then we've added a value for unknown scientific name at the end of the list, in case you're out in the field and you don't know what the plant is. Okay, so that's that. Go ahead and click OK to close that. And now we're going to do the same thing again for the source succession number domain. So click on table to domain again. Input table is going to be source succession number. The code field from the drop-down list is going to be source succession number. Same for description. Input workspace, we're going to click and drag our geodatabase in there. And then the domain name is going to be source succession number. And we're going to add East Asian onto the end of this because this is again just for our East Asian section. And then it brings up this description, which I'm just going to go ahead and copy and then change it to the replace option to replace what I've already done. And then go ahead and paste that back in there. And hit OK. And again, the geoprocessing tool runs in the background. And when it's done, it will pop up a little message box for us. There we go. And it's always a good idea, again, to validate that this worked. So right-click on your geodatabase, hit Properties, scroll down to the S's, source succession number, and there you go. We've got a list of all of our accession numbers. And your accession numbers may be in a far different format than ours, but again, this field should be able to accommodate whatever format they're in. Okay, hit OK, and now we are essentially done creating those domains. And now what we can do is assign them to the Plant Center feature class. And to do that, we can use a geoprocessing tool here called Assign Domain to Field. And what we're going to do essentially is assign those new lists of values to the source succession number field and the scientific name field inside the Plant Center's feature class so that the database essentially knows that we want to have this drop-down list of those values. So in the Assign Domain to Field window here, the input table that we're going to assign this stuff to, or those domains to, is going to be inside of our geodatabase, and you can move this window out of the way. Open up Base Map, and then scroll all the way down to the P's, and Plant Center is going to be our input table. So you can click that, drag it in there, Alternatively, you can hit the folder icon here and browse for it in a separate window if you don't have the screen real estate to do it. Okay, the field name we're going to use. For this particular one, we want to use, we'll start with the scientific name field. So you can select that from the list. And then it asks which domain do you want to assign to it. And we're going to want to assign our scientific name East Asian. And then it asks which subtypes do you want to assign these domains to. And basically this means that when you're, say, collecting data about a tree, do you want that scientific name list to come up as the same way as you would if you were collecting a shrub? And yeah, we do. We want these names to come up for all of these different types. So go ahead and select OK, or select all, and then hit OK. And as with the previous tools, the work is being done in the background. It doesn't look like it's reporting as it did last time that it's running. But we know that it's doing it, and it will pop up a message as it finishes. Oh, there it goes. Now it's showing us some info about it. Wait for it. And any minute now. And of course, if you have an older computer, this is going to take a little bit longer. Any day now? Coming? Alright, there we go. So now, if we want to validate that that worked, scroll down to the Plant Center's feature class, right-click and get the properties. And then go to the Fields tab. Scroll down to the scientific name field. Actually, better yet, let's go to the Subtypes tab and make sure that it worked for every subtype. So now, scroll down to scientific name here, and you can see that scientific name East Asian is assigned for the unknown subtype. If we click on 3 for lichenous, which is probably something you're not collecting data on, but you could if you really wanted to. Scroll down to scientific name, and there it is again. So that we know that that domain is now assigned, and anytime we're collecting data out in the field, we're going to be able to pick the scientific name from a drop-down list. Okay, so hit OK to close that window, and we're going to run that tool one more time and assign the source succession number domain to the Plant Center's feature class. So now you can, again, select Plant Center, drag it into the input table field, and then from the field name box, you can click the drop down, and we're going to do source succession number this time, just toward the top of the list. And the domain we're going to assign to it is the source succession number domain. And I'm not seeing it. It's in here somewhere. There we go, source succession number East Asian. And we're going to select all the subtypes again and hit OK. And this tool is probably going to take about the same amount of time to run and get the job done as it did before. So the work that we're doing here is actually kind of modifying the data model a little bit and making it work for our particular needs. And this process of creating domains is a really useful trick, especially if you want to control the quality of the data that's being collected out in the field. If you're going to be sending someone other than yourself out there, maybe someone who doesn't know plants that well, giving them a list of values to select from is always a good idea. And again, this tool can take some time to run. Okay, now that it's done, we're just going to go through and make sure that it actually worked correctly again. So scroll down to Plant Center, Properties, Subtypes tab, Source Succession Number. You should see in the domain field here that a source succession number domain has been assigned to it. And it's always a good idea to click on another subtype and see that it's also done that. Alright, so we're all set here. We can close out this window, and we're done in our catalog. So we're going to finish this segment up and close our catalog. Now that we've gone through and created some drop-down lists for data collection in the field, we're one step closer to being ready to go out there. And a big part of getting ready to collect data is really planning out how things are going to go, planning out where you're going to collect your data. And if you're using GPS to do it, making sure that the GPS satellites are going to be available and that you're going to be getting good accurate signal while you're out there. There's always times of the day when there's kind of what we call satellite blackouts, when you're not getting enough signals from different satellites to be able to get a good signal to accurately collect data. So what we're going to do to figure that out and to see if we're going to have good satellite coverage while we're out there is we're going to open a web browser, and we're going to go to Trimble's website. Trimble is one of the leading manufacturers of GPS equipment. Go to www.trimble.com. Hit OK. And when you get there, just go ahead in the search box here and type setup plan. You can see I've already typed it before. Press enter. And under the searches here, click on Trimble Planning Software Download. And then click on the Setup Planning 2.8 file here and download this. And you can just go ahead and hit run if you'd like. Depending on which web browser you're using, you may have to deal with this file a little differently. But essentially what we're going to do is just run the file and install it on our computer. It's a little planning program that essentially can figure out where the satellites are going to be in the sky depending on your location, and kind of produce some charts that show you their position and the relative accuracy you'll be getting at a given time. Okay, so this is just about done downloading for me here. And if things go well, it should open and we can install it on our computer. Okay, I'm going to hit yes here. Select your language, hit OK. Okay, when it gets to the actual install screen here, hit next. And just install it in the default location. Hit next. And then hit install. Alright. When it's all done, it gets to the final screen, hit finish. And then you can close your web browser. And now if you go down to your start menu, go to all programs here. There should be a Trimble Office program group. Go into that and then open the planning part under utilities, the planning program. And I always like it maximized. The first thing you want to do once this is open is we're going to change our reference station. You can see it defaults to Munich, Germany. That's not exactly accurate for us. So go down to station. And you can either choose your own particular station, but that is good for you. But I recommend following along with what I'm doing right now. Click on the city button here, and then scroll down. I'm in Davis, California, which is closest to Sacramento, so that's the big city I'm going to look for on this list. I went a little bit too far. And oh, almost there. There we go. Looks like there's two Sacramentos. We'll just go with the first one and hit select. And it puts in the latitude and longitude of Sacramento for me and some predetermined values. Go ahead and hit OK. And now at the top it says we're in Sacramento. That's good. And there's a couple different little graphs here that we can look at that are kind of interesting. This first one here is for elevation. There's one for number of satellites. This is always a good one to know. If you click on this, it brings up satellite visibility for us. And essentially you need a minimum of 4 satellites to get a really good signal. So you can see that as time goes on throughout the day here, that we are definitely going to have that 4. But just because there's 4 in the sky doesn't mean you're always going to be getting them. There may be trees in the way, buildings, other things like that that are keeping them from connecting to your receiver. So a higher number is better, and it looks like there's going to be a lot of different satellites today. So you can close that window. And then the most important one to look at, I think, is this one called DOP. And DOP stands for dilution of precision. So this is really the estimated accuracy of sorts that you're going to be getting when you're out there. So click on that, and it brings up a chart showing you what the estimated accuracies are going to be throughout the day. And we have a cutoff in the software of 6, basically saying that a dilution of precision any worse than that is not ideal. So as you can see, we don't get anywhere close to 6, although there are some spikes in the data as the day goes on, and they get a little bit high at a couple times. So it may be good to note these times and be prepared to kind of maybe take a break at that point while things get better, while satellites rearrange themselves in the sky. So keep these in mind, and if you ever see one of these spikes that goes up over 6, you're going to know that you're going to need to take a break at that point, and allow for the satellites to get back into a good position for things to go. And there's different kinds of dilutional precision. There's one for geometry, there's one for position, which is and then there's one for vertical and one for horizontal. Basically, just look at the highest spike, and that's the easiest way to do it. And there's a lot of different concepts to learn about GPS, and Trimble has some great resources for you to check out about that. And their website's a really good place to start. But essentially, this is what you need to look for, is the dilution of precision for planning. Okay, so that's all we're going to do with this program, so you can go ahead and hit close. And that'll be it for this segment. Now that we know where our satellites are going to be and what our accuracy is going to be, and if there's any kind of bad times to be worried about collecting data, we can get ready to actually take our data model and check it out so that we can put it onto a mobile device. So to do that, we're going to do this all on ArcMap. Go ahead and open ArcMap. And now the rest of this video is going to assume that you have ArcPad installed on your computer and your mobile device. Generally, when you install ArcPad, it automatically installs it on your computer, and then it'll ask you if you want to install it on your mobile device. So we're going to assume that you have ArcPad 8 or 10, and for this demo, we're going to be using ArcPad 10. Okay, so when the Getting Started window opens, we can just go to the My Templates thing here. If you're using ArcPad 9 or ArcGIS 9, excuse me, you'll just want to open with a blank map. And ArcGIS 10, select My Templates, click on blank map, hit OK. And now I'm going to keep this editor window or toolbar open, and I'm just going to dock it up here to get it out of the way. Let's see. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do here is let's add our aerial photo in that we downloaded with our lesson data. So click on Add Data, and who knows where it takes you here, but essentially from the drop-down, click on our folder connection, Lesson 4, and we're going to load the East Asian Section 2009 photo. And this is an area that I defined that's as our East Asian collection, or section of the Arboretum, and I want to go out and collect some data in this area. So if you have an aerial photo of your entire garden, it's best to zoom in to the area that you're going to collect data in just for that day, so that you create a small photo that'll open up and read well on a mobile device. A big photo will cause your device to have a lot of problems, so it's always a good idea to just zoom in to the section you're going to work at, and then when we check out data, the checkout tools will automatically clip down a photo if you have a larger one. For the purpose of this lesson, I did it ahead of time to make the file download quick. Okay, so we have our aerial photo here, and first thing we have to figure out is, like, what are we going to collect once we're out there? And I just want to go out there and collect some plant data, which is the most common data for gardens to go out there and collect. Other things may include you may want to go out and map your pathways or utilities or things like that. But for the purpose of this exercise, we're just going to do plant data. So click on the Add Data button here, and when this window comes up, you can go to your folder connection and click on that, go into Lesson 4, and then go into the UC Davis Arboretum 0.19 geodatabase. into the base map feature data set and scroll over to the M's and select mass planting, and then scroll over to see plant center, hit the control key and hit plant center. You should see mass planting semicolon plant center at the bottom here, and click add, and it'll add both of those feature classes into our ArcMap document. Okay, so there's not much we need to do to these. We've already assigned the domains in Arc Catalog so that we can have drop-down lists when we're out there. So we're pretty much ready to go. And to get our data on our mobile device, we're going to use the ArcPad Data Manager. And to do that, to get or access that, you're going to want to go to the Customize menu here and click on Extensions. And under Extensions, turn on the ArcPad Data Manager, and then hit Close. And then we can go to the Customize menu again and turn on the ArcPad Data Manager toolbar. So go to Toolbars and select ArcPad Data Manager. And from this toolbar, basically it has a few buttons on it for us to be able to access the data and get it out to ArcPad. So basically we're going to use this one that says Get Data for ArcPad. Check on that. It tells you a little bit about what this wizard does. You can get rid of this screen, but I recommend reading it for the first time before you get rid of it. We're going to skip that and go ahead and hit Next. And now it's asking us what data do we want to put on our mobile device. Now, since I only have these 3 layers loaded into ArcMap, it's pretty simple for us to deal with. I always like to think about the photo first, and right now it says do not export. We're going to change that option to export as background TIFF, and it gives you 2 different options for what format the file is going to be in. JPEGs tend to be a little bit smaller and maybe a little easier on mobile devices, but the last time I tried a JPEG it didn't show up correctly, so just for errors and reducing them, we're going to go ahead and export background as TIFF. Basically it says we're going to have our background image on the mobile device in a TIFF format. Now these 2 layers at the top here, we're going to want to collect data about. ArcPad supports what's called related tables now, and if I extend this or expand this related, or excuse me, the layer field here, or layer column, it shows that it's going to check out plant centers plus this related table called plant common name, which has a one-to-one relationship in it. And you don't need to know a lot about that, except for the fact that basically if you want to add common names for any plants while you're out there, the table that we're storing common names in and the data model is going to go out there with you. So you could add those if you want, but essentially, that's something that can be easily done in the office and is not a good use of time out in the field. So I wouldn't worry about that too much at this point. Okay, so we need to get these plant center and mass planting layers ready to go out in the field with us. So we need to change the action on these to export these. So you click on Action for Plant Center, and we want to check them out for disconnected editing in ArcPad. And then it asks you, once you put your mouse pointer over that, do you want it based on a defined extent or schema only? And we want it to be a blank, empty database out there. Any data that we may have in there, we don't want to take that out with us because we're collecting data for the first time out here. So I'm going to click on schema only. Now if you do want to go out there and take any data that you previously collected, if you have a group of plants that you have data on and you want to go out there and you need to add a couple more to it, you'd want to click on the other option, which is data based on defined extent. And that'll just basically check out any plant points that you have within the scope of where we're zoomed in. But as I mentioned, since we're going out there for the first time collecting new data, we don't have anything. We're going to go with schema only, which is a blank data set. Okay, so both mass plantings and plant centers have checkout schema only. Our aerial photograph has background TIFF selected. We'll click Next. And now it has an option here for selecting some fields to store pictures. The data model is not currently set up to have a field to store pictures in it, but if you wanted to create one of those, it'd be really easy to go into each one of these feature classes, plant center and mass planting, and add a field in there so that when you're out there collecting data, if you have a camera on your data collector, as getting more and more common these days, when you're collecting your location for that feature, you can additionally take a picture of it, and it will store that picture in the geodatabase for you. So as I mentioned, we don't have that functionality set up in the data model right now, so we're just going to click Next and move forward. Okay, so now it asks you some information about the files that we're going to check out here. So it asks what's the name of the folder that you want to store the data in. And now I think a good practice on this is to use a date and the name of the area you're going to collect data in. So I like to store my dates kind of in backwards format, if you will. Essentially the year first, and then the month, and I believe today is the 26th of July, so I'm going to type that in there. And then I like to follow that with the name of the area that we're going to collect data in. That's the East Asian section. So that way I know that this folder, when I go to look for it on my hard drive later, I know exactly what data I collected data on, and I know where I collected that data. So that file names can be really useful for that. Then it asks you, where do you want this folder to be stored? I'm going to hit the folder icon here. And I'm going to store it in the same folder as we've been working in, which is always a really good idea to keep all of your information there. So I'm going to go to my GIS folder, UC Davis Arboretum folder, and Lesson 4. And hit OK. And then it asks you, what do you want to name the map? It has a default name in here because we haven't saved our map document yet. But I also recommend doing naming this the same as the folder. And that way it's really clear what this document contains. Okay. And then go ahead and hit Next. And now this is a neat little feature that they've added to ArcPad, is that it can automatically copy the data to your mobile device for you. So this is a good point to make sure that you have your mobile device connected to your computer, usually through USB or other cable, and that it's turned on. And now if we click on this Create Ready to Deploy CAB file containing the ArcPad data, it will automatically put it on the mobile device for me when I'm done. So I'm going to click Finish. And right now it's going through and it's going to clip down any data for us if our photo was bigger, and it's going to get those files ready for checking out. So now it gives you a little summary here, and it tells you where it saved the checkout for you, the name of it, the projection that we assigned in Lesson 2 is already right there. The number of layers we checked out. It checked out 2 feature layers. That's our plant center and mass planning feature classes. And it checked out 1 image layer. That's our background photo. And the rest of the stuff we didn't really do, except for the very bottom one here where we created a deployable CAB file. And yes, that succeeded. So we hit OK. And now it asks if you want to put that CAB file onto our mobile device. So I'm going to hit yes. And then it says, oh, you already have one of these installed on there. It's because I tested this out before we did this video. So I'm just going to go ahead and hit yes to replace. You probably won't get this message, so it'll probably just skip to the screen and do it automatically for you. And this is a really neat feature. Instead of having to manually go to the spot that you saved the checkout and then copy it to the device. And then it asks if there's any, check your mobile device to see if there's any additional steps necessary. And you can't see my mobile device screen right now, but basically it asks, do you want to put this on there? It's from an unknown publisher, so I'm going to hit yes. And then there's a previous version that's going to be removed. I'm going to hit OK. And then it's going to go through and ask, where do you want to save this? Do you want to save it on the device or on the memory card installed? I'm just going to put it on the device. And then it'll go through and do it. And now these steps could be different depending on the version of Windows Mobile that you have on your mobile device. But we'll look a little bit closer at the mobile device and some of the steps involved with using it in our next lesson. And then my mobile device says that it was successfully installed. I hit OK. And now that I'm done with this, I'm going to hit OK here, and we're all done. So that's going to pretty much conclude the getting ready to collect data, and our next steps are going to be to take this out in the field and actually collect some data. So let's see, to get ready to close here, I'm going to leave my ArcPad Data Manager toolbar open. I'm going to close ArcMap, ask me if I want to save changes. Sure. save changes, and we'll call that lesson 4. So navigate to the lesson 4 folder that we've created, and once you get in there, you can title it lesson 4, hit save, and we're all set. Okay, so that concludes lesson 4. So today we learned how to prepare to collect field data using the ArcGIS Public Gardens data model. Next time we're going to prepare to collect data out in the field and learn how to set up our GPS equipment. We'll see you out there next time.